The Florida sun hammered down on the corrugated tin roof of the briefing shed like the fist of an angry god. Inside, the air hung thick enough to chew, a toxic cocktail of diesel fumes, stale coffee, and the particular musk of men who believed themselves invincible. The shed sat at the edge of the Everglades, where civilization surrendered to a wilderness older and meaner than any war these Marines had ever trained for. 4 men would walk into that swamp in 12 hours. Only one woman would bring them out alive. But they didn't know that yet. None of them did. Major Harrison Blackwell stood at the head of a folding table, his uniform somehow still crisp despite the oppressive heat. He was a recruitment poster brought to life. Square jaw, steel gray eyes, shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the entire Marine Corps. But look closer and you'd see the cracks. The tremor in his right hand when he thought no one was watching. The way his pupils were just slightly too dilated, even in the harsh fluorescent light. The thin sheen of sweat on his upper lip that had nothing to do with the temperature. He was looking at a topographical map spread across the table, jabbing at it with a government-issue pen that clicked with mechanical precision. 4 Marines stood at attention behind him. They were young, they were hard. They believed they were the tip of the spear, the finest warriors America could forge. They had no idea how wrong they were, about to be proven. Staff Sergeant Garrett Holloway was 32 but looked older. Combat in Helmand Province had etched lines into his face that made him appear like he'd lived 2 lifetimes. He was the platoon leader, the man other men looked to when the bullets started flying. His hands were scarred from 1,000 training exercises. His eyes constantly scanning, always assessing threats. He wore his responsibility like armor, heavy and unforgiving. Corporal Jensen Kincaid stood to Holloway's left, 28 years old, built like a brick fortress with knuckles that bore the permanent discoloration of a man who settled arguments with violence. He was the platoon's hand-to-hand combat instructor, the one they called when someone needed to learn respect the hard way. His smile was easy, but his eyes were hard. He'd failed the SEAL selection pipeline twice. That failure had calcified into a resentment he carried like a knife against his ribs, a chip on his shoulder the size of a battleship, and a burning need to prove that SEALs weren't so special after all. Private First Class Wyatt Brennan was 23 and still had that eager, hungry look of a man trying to prove he belonged. He was lean where Kincaid was thick with quick eyes and quicker hands. The platoon's designated marksman, though he hadn't seen real combat yet. Just endless training, endless drills, endless preparation for a test that never seemed to come. He stood at attention with his back ramrod straight, desperate to be seen as worthy. Lance Corporal Reed Sullivan completed the quartet. 26, radio operator, the communications specialist who could make dead equipment sing. He had a smart mouth and a smarter mind. The kind of guy who'd scored perfect on his ASVAB and could have gone anywhere but chose the infantry because he wanted to be where the action was. He wore a cocky grin that suggested he knew something the rest of them didn't. Blackwell's voice cut through the humid air like a blade through butter. Gentlemen, Operation Gator Fang is 72 hours of pure hell. He traced the map with his finger. The line cut through some of the most unforgiving terrain in North America. You will insert 30 clicks deep into the Everglades. No support, no extraction unless you complete the objective or sustain life-threatening injury. Your mission is simple. Navigate to the designated extraction point. Evade the Op for Hunter teams. Survive. The route he'd marked passed through swampland, where alligators outnumbered people 1,000 to 1, where the water was the color of old coffee and hid things that could kill you in a dozen different ways, where men had walked in and never walked out. This is Force Recon selection level training. The Marine Corps' elite. You 4 were chosen because you're the best. He paused. Let the weight of that statement settle. Don't disappoint me. Holloway studied the map with a professional eye. His training kicked in automatically identifying high-ground water sources, potential ambush points. But something nagged at him. Something felt wrong about the route Blackwell had chosen. Too exposed. Too predictable. He opened his mouth to voice the concern. The door to the shed swung open. The woman who walked in moved like water, smooth, unhurried, economical. She was 45 years old, but carried herself with a confidence that suggested she'd seen more in her life than most people saw in 3 lifetimes. 25 years in the most elite special operations unit in the world had a way of doing that to a person. Lieutenant Commander Elena Whitmore wore simple tactical pants and a moisture-wicking shirt. Navy issue but no rank visible. No unit patch. Nothing to identify her as anything other than a person who knew how to move in hostile environments. Her hair was the color of wheat left too long in the sun, pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her eyes were the green of deep ocean water, the kind that hid reefs and riptides and things that could kill you before you knew they were there. She had a dusting of freckles across her nose that might have made her look approachable, except for the 3 pale scars that ran down her left forearm like tally marks. Her hands were small, but her grip, if you ever shook, it would surprise you. Calloused, strong, the hands of someone who'd done real work. Hard work. The kind of work that left marks on your body and deeper marks on your soul. She stopped just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust to the dim interior. She took in the 4 Marines with a single sweeping glance that cataloged everything. Their weapons, their stance, their attitude, the way Kincaid's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw her, the way Brennan straightened up even more if that was possible, the way Sullivan's grin widened into something that wasn't quite respectful. 25 years of reading rooms, reading people, reading the difference between those who would help you and those who would get you killed. These 4 fell somewhere in between. Blackwell's face went through a fascinating transformation. Surprise followed by irritation, followed by something that looked uncomfortably like contempt. "You must be the Navy liaison." His voice dripped with barely concealed disdain. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Whitmore, SEAL Team 3, here as observer and subject matter expert on swamp operations." Her voice was low and even with a slight rasp that suggested she'd spent time breathing smoke or screaming orders over gunfire. Probably both. "Subject matter expert." Blackwell repeated the words like they tasted bad. "The Navy sent me a den mother to babysit my Marines." The 4 men behind him didn't quite laugh, but the amusement rippled through them like a current. Kincaid's grin got wider. Holloway's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flickered with something that might have been approval of his commanding officer's assessment. Brennan looked confused, like he wasn't sure what the appropriate response was. Sullivan just kept that cocky smirk plastered on his face. Elena didn't react, didn't blush, didn't bristle, didn't rise to the bait. She simply walked to the table and looked down at the map. Her eyes traced the route Blackwell had marked. Her finger, unbidden, reached out and tapped 3 specific points along the planned path. "This route puts you through snakebite low ground. Flash flood risk with the storms coming in." Her finger moved. "Here you're crossing directly through a known alligator breeding ground." She tapped the final mark. "And your extraction point is built on unstable substrate. Looks like solid earth on satellite imaging, but it's actually a peat bog. You put a helicopter down there, it'll sink to its axles before the rotors stop spinning." The silence in the shed was absolute. Blackwell's face went through another transformation. The contempt crystallized into something harder, colder. His hand, the one with the tremor, clenched into a fist. "Are you questioning my tactical planning, Lieutenant Commander?" "I'm offering expertise, Major. It's what I'm here for." "What you're here for is to observe. That means you watch. You take notes. You keep your mouth shut, offside unless spoken to." He stepped closer to her, invaded her space, used his height and his rank as weapons. "My Marines don't need advice from some diversity quota who probably couldn't ruck 20 miles with a full combat load." Elena met his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't look away. The moment stretched out, taut as a tripwire. "Understood, Major, I'll observe." But her eyes went back to the map, to those 3 points she'd identified. She was memorizing them, filing them away, because she knew something Blackwell either didn't know or didn't care about. People died in the Everglades. People died easily. And bad planning didn't just mean failure, it meant body bags. Blackwell turned back to his Marines, dismissing her with the gesture. "Gear check is at 1400 hours. We insert at first light tomorrow. Questions?" "No, sir." They chorused it like a prayer. "Dismissed." The Marines filed out. Elena followed last, moving with that same water-smooth economy of motion. As she passed through the door, Blackwell's voice stopped her. "Lieutenant Commander?" She turned. "I don't know what strings you pulled to get this assignment, But let me make something crystal clear. This is a Marine operation. You're here because some admiral thinks that we need adult supervision. We don't. His eyes were hard as flint. Touch nothing. Interfere with nothing. If my men fail, they fail on their own merits, not because some Navy publicity stunt distracted them. Are we clear? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Really looked. Saw the tremor he was trying to hide. Saw the pharmaceutical glaze over eyes that should have been sharp. Saw a man holding on to control by his fingernails. And saw something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. A wrongness she couldn't quite identify but had learned over 25 years never to ignore. Crystal clear, Major. She walked out into the Florida heat. The sun was a physical weight. The air smelled like rotting vegetation and diesel fuel. Somewhere in the distance, a gator bellowed. The sound was primordial, ancient, a reminder that humans were the newcomers here and the swamp didn't care about rank or gender or how many wars you'd fought. Elena pulled out her satellite phone, checked the signal. Weak but present, she composed a message, encrypted, routed through channels that didn't officially exist. Thorn, route is suicide. Blackwell is compromised. Something wrong here. Request guidance. She hit send and watched the message compress, encrypt, and launch itself into the void. Then she walked toward the equipment yard where the Marines would be staging their gear. She had work to do, observations to make, and a very bad feeling that this exercise was going to go sideways in ways no one was prepared for. The gear check area was an open-air shed with a concrete floor and enough space to lay out equipment for a platoon. The 4 Marines had claimed their section and were methodically unpacking their rucksacks, arranging everything on waterproof ponchos, with the precision of men who'd done this 1,000 times. It was an impressive display. Top-of-the-line everything. M4 carbines with advanced optics and suppressors, night vision goggles that cost more than most cars, tactical communication systems that could punch through jamming and atmospheric interference, GPS units with satellite uplinks, medical kits that could handle everything from a sucking chest wound to a snake bite, water filtration systems, high-calorie ration packs, enough ammunition to fight a small war. Elena set her own pack down in a corner. It was small, almost comically small compared to the massive rucksacks the Marines carried. An old Alice pack, probably military surplus from the 90s with stains and repairs that spoke of hard use over many years. No brand names, no high-tech fabrics, just green canvas and determination. Kincaid noticed first. Of course he did. He was the kind of man who noticed perceived weakness the way a shark noticed blood in the water. "Hey, Brennan, check it out." His voice carried across the shed, loud enough to be heard but not quite loud enough to be called shouting. "Looks like the lieutenant commander is packing for a weekend camping trip." Brennan glanced over, tried to suppress a grin, and failed. Sullivan wandered closer, his radio equipment already secured to his vest. He squatted down next to Elena's pack, making a show of examining it. "Ma'am, is this even regulation? Looks like something my granddad used in Korea." "Older," Elena said, without looking up from her own equipment check. "But still works." "Yeah, but..." Sullivan picked up her pack with one hand, hefting it. "This can't be more than 30 pounds. We're going out for 3 days. What did you pack? A toothbrush and a granola bar." Now all 4 Marines were watching. Holloway hadn't said anything yet, but he'd stopped his own gear check. This was entertainment, a break in the monotony of preparation. Kincaid stood up from his own pile of equipment and sauntered over. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of a man who'd found prey. "Seriously, ma'am, what do you have in there? Makeup, a change of clothes, maybe a cell phone charger." He squatted down next to her pack, reaching for it. "Let me guess, you're planning to call for extraction after the first night when you realize you can't handle..." Elena's hand shot out, not fast enough to be aggressive, not slow enough to be weak, just precisely timed. She caught his wrist before his fingers touched her pack. "Corporal, I'd prefer if you didn't touch my equipment." Her voice was still even, still calm, but there was steel underneath now. A warning. Kincaid looked down at her hand on his wrist, looked at her face. The smile on his lips got wider, meaner. "Or what, ma'am?" The air in the shed changed, became charged. Holloway took a step closer. His professional interest peaked. Brennan stopped pretending to work on his gear. Sullivan's grin faltered just slightly. Elena released Kincaid's wrist and stood up. She was 5'7". Kincaid was 6'2" and outweighed her by at least 80 pounds of muscle. The physical disparity was obvious. Laughable even. Or nothing, Corporal. I'm just asking for professional courtesy. Kincaid stood up too. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck. The movement was theatrical, designed to emphasize his size, his strength, his dominance. You know what, ma'am? I think you could use some professional courtesy, some professional advice. He gestured to the training dummy set up in the corner of the shed. Standard Marine Corps issue. A weighted bag shaped vaguely like a human torso. See, the Everglades can be dangerous. Snakes, gators, maybe even some bad guys if you're unlucky. And you're going to be out there with us. So I'm thinking for your own safety, I should teach you some basic self-defense. That's not necessary, Corporal. Oh, I think it is. Kincaid walked to the dummy. He grabbed it, demonstrating a simple joint lock, twisted the dummy's arm behind its back and slammed it face first into the concrete. The impact echoed through the shed like a gunshot. See, simple compliance hold. Something to slow an enemy down if you get grabbed. Let me show you how it feels, so you understand the leverage points. He turned back to Elena, took a step toward her. Holloway didn't intervene. Brennan looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Sullivan's grin was back wider than ever. This was hazing. This was establishing the pecking order. This was a lesson that the old boys of the special operations community had been teaching uppity females for years. You don't belong here. You're weak. You're a liability. Let us show you. Kincaid reached out and grabbed Elena's left arm. His grip was iron, designed to be just slightly painful, just slightly intimidating. Don't worry, ma'am. I'll be gentle. He started to apply pressure, started to twist her arm behind her back the way he'd done with the dummy, started to demonstrate his superior strength, his superior skill, his superior right to be here. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Elena didn't resist the pressure, didn't try to pull away. Instead, she moved with it, yielded to it. Her entire body flowed in the direction he was pulling, rotating her shoulder, dropping her center of gravity. It was like trying to grab water, like trying to hold smoke. Her right hand came up, not in a fist, not in a strike, just fingers extended precise as a surgeon's scalpel. She found the cluster of nerves on the inside of Kincaid's wrist, just below the thumb. The radial nerve where it surfaced close to the skin, vulnerable, exposed. She pressed, not hard, maybe 10 pounds of the pressure, exactly the right angle, exactly the right spot, exactly the right amount of force. The effect was instantaneous, catastrophic. White-hot agony exploded up Kincaid's arm. His fingers went numb. His grip vanished as if it had never existed. He tried to pull back, but Elena's other hand was already at his elbow, not grabbing, just guiding. Using his own momentum, his own strength, his own attempt to escape against him. The elbow is a hinge joint. It only bends one way. Elena knew this. Kincaid's body knew this. But his brain, flooded with pain and surprise, forgot. He went down. One knee hit the concrete with a wet crack that made everyone in the shed wince. His head bowed forward, not in deference, but because his body's balance had been completely compromised. He was kneeling before her, his right arm extended at an angle that screamed submission. Every muscle in his body locked up in a futile attempt to escape pain that was already happening. Elena held the position for exactly 1 second, long enough for everyone to see it, long enough for the lesson to sink in. Then she released him. Stepped back. Kincaid scrambled to his feet. His face was a mask of shock and humiliation. He cradled his wrist fingers, flexing, testing to make sure everything still worked. His eyes blazed with shame and fury in equal measure. Elena's expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still neutral. She might have been discussing the weather. The elbow is a hinge, Corporal, not a ball joint. If you forget that, you give your opponent control of your entire kinetic chain. Her voice was soft, educational, like she was teaching a class, not humiliating a grown man in front of his peers. Pressure points are force multipliers. 10 pounds in the right place beats 100 pounds in the wrong place. Size and strength mean nothing if you can't apply them. The sound of boots on concrete made everyone turn. Major Blackwell strode into the shed. His eyes took in the scene instantly. Kincaid flushed and breathing hard, still massaging his wrist. Elena standing relaxed, her gear still unpacked. The other three Marines frozen in various states of shock. What the hell happened here? Kincaid opened his mouth, closed it. The truth was too embarrassing. The lie wouldn't hold up under questioning. Holloway stepped forward, his face carefully neutral. Training demonstrations, sir. The lieutenant commander was showing Corporal Kincaid some hand-to-hand techniques. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. He looked from Holloway to Elena to Kincaid. He knew, of course he knew. You didn't make Major without learning to read body language, to sense the unspoken currents in a room. His face hardened into something ugly. Lieutenant Commander Whitmore. A word. Outside. Now. Elena followed him out of the shed into the blazing afternoon sun. Blackwell walked 20 paces away from the building, far enough that voices wouldn't carry. Then he rounded on her. What the hell do you think you're doing? Corporal Kincaid grabbed me. Major? I defended myself. You just assaulted one of my Marines. He assaulted me, sir. I used the minimum force necessary to extract myself from an unwanted physical interaction. That's textbook self-defense doctrine. She paused, let the silence stretch. Or would you prefer I file a formal complaint about unwanted physical contact? The threat hung in the air between them. They both knew it. A harassment complaint would trigger an investigation. Questions would be asked. The whole exercise would be shut down pending review. Blackwell's career, already on thin ice for reasons Elena was only beginning to understand, would shatter. His jaw worked. The tremor in his hand got worse. You just embarrassed one of my Marines. You undermined my authority. You disrupted my operation. With respect, Major, your Marine grabbed me. I extracted myself. If that embarrassed him, perhaps he should reconsider his approach to female service members. Blackwell stepped closer, invaded her personal space, used his height, his rank, his authority as weapons. Listen to me very carefully, Lieutenant Commander. I don't know what kind of games they play in the Navy, but in my Marine Corps we have something called unit cohesion. We have respect for the chain of command. We have order. His voice dropped to something that was almost a whisper, almost a threat. You are an observer. That is all you are. You observe, you take notes, you keep your mouth shut and your hands to yourself. You do not engage with my men. You do not train them. You do not interfere with my operation in any way. Understood, sir. Is that crystal clear? Crystal clear. He stared at her for another long moment, looking for any sign of defiance, any crack in her composure. Found nothing. She was a wall, smooth and featureless and utterly unmoved by his threats. He spun on his heel and marched back toward the main buildings. Elena watched him go, watched the tremor in his hand, the stiffness in his gait, the barely contained rage that radiated from every line of his body. Something was very wrong with Major Harrison Blackwell, and she was going to find out what. Back in the gear shed, the four Marines stood in uncomfortable silence. Kincaid was still massaging his wrist. The others were processing what they just witnessed. A 45-year-old woman outweighed by 80 pounds had put their best fighter on his knees in less than 2 seconds, without breaking a sweat, without raising her voice, without even changing her expression. That was, Brennan started, then stopped. He didn't have words for what that was. Humiliating, Kincaid growled. That's what that was. Some trick, some Navy bullshit. But his voice lacked conviction. He'd felt the precision of her movement, the economy of force, the absolute control. That wasn't a trick. That was 25 years of training, 25 years of combat, 25 years of being underestimated and proving people wrong. Sullivan let out a low whistle. Guys, I think we might have misjudged the lieutenant commander. Shut up, Kincaid snapped. I'm just saying. I said shut up. Holloway held up a hand. Enough, all of you. We have gear to check and an op to prepare for. Whatever just happened, it doesn't change the mission. He looked at each of them in turn. We go into the swamp tomorrow at 500. We complete the objective. We come home. Everything else is noise. He was right, of course. The mission was what mattered, but as they went back to checking their gear, each of them kept glancing at the door, wondering when the lieutenant commander would return, wondering what else she could do, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they'd made a serious mistake. Elena returned to the gear shed an hour later. The Marines pretended not to notice her, pretended to be focused on their equipment, but she could feel their eyes tracking her as she walked to her corner and resumed unpacking her pack. Small pack. Old pack. But what came out of it was anything but amateur hour. A water filtration straw that could process 1,000 liters. A ferro rod that would start fires in any weather. A compact medical kit with tourniquets, Israeli bandages, hemostatic gauze. A survival knife with a 7-inch blade, the steel dark with age and hard use. Paracord, a small tarp, water purification tablets, a compact fishing kit, waterproof matches sealed in a plastic case, no GPS, no fancy electronics, no batteries to die or circuits to corrode, just tools. Simple, reliable, proven over decades of hard use. Brennan couldn't help himself. "Ma'am, why no GPS?" Elena looked up at him, saw the genuine curiosity in his young face, the hunger to learn that reminded her of herself 25 years ago. "What's your current GPS battery level, Private?" 73%, ma'am." "And when that runs out?" "I've got spare batteries, 4 of them. So maybe 5 days of GPS usage if you're conservative. After that," Brennan hesitated. "Map and compass, basic land nav, we all passed that course." "Good. And when was the last time you checked the magnetic declination for this area?" Silence. "Magnetic declination in the Everglades is approximately 5 degrees west. Your compass will be off by almost 100 meters per kilometer if you don't correct for it. In terrain like this, 100 meters can put you in quicksand instead of solid ground." She pulled a battered topographic map from her pack and spread it on the ground. The Marines, despite themselves, moved closer. The map was covered in handwritten notes, pencil marks indicating seasonal flood zones, red X's marking alligator nesting areas, blue circles around water sources that were safe to drink from, yellow highlights on areas of unstable ground. "This is 20 years of institutional knowledge," Elena said, tapping the map. "From SEALs who have trained in this environment." She traced Blackwell's planned route. "Your route puts you here at dusk on day 2, low ground. If it rains, and it will, you'll be chest deep in water by midnight. Every predator in a 5-mile radius will know exactly where you are because you'll be the only warm-blooded thing stupid enough to be standing in floodwater." Holloway studied the map, studied the GPS route. His jaw tightened. Major Blackwell approved this route. Major Blackwell made a mistake. Whether through ignorance or intention, I don't know. But that route will get someone hurt. Or worse. Kincaid finally spoke. His voice was rough with barely suppressed anger. "So what, we're supposed to trust you instead, the woman who just humiliated me in front of my squad?" He stepped forward. "No offense, ma'am, but I don't know you. I don't know your qualifications. For all I know, you're some desk jockey who pencil-whipped a SEAL qualification and now thinks she's operator material." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, saw the hurt pride, the damaged ego, the resentment that went bone deep, and she made a decision. "Corporal Kincaid, you attempted SEAL selection twice. Both times you made it through Hell Week. Both times you failed the land navigation phase in the final weeks." Kincaid's face went pale. "That information was supposed to be confidential." "How the hell did she know?" "I know, because I was an instructor evaluator during your second attempt. I watched you trust your GPS over your own eyes. I watched you walk right past a water source marked on your map because your electronics said it wasn't there." She stood up, met his eyes. "The Everglades will punish that kind of thinking. Not with a failed evaluation. With death." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "You don't have to trust me, Corporal. You don't have to like me, but 24 hours from now, when you're lost and wet and cold, and your GPS is dead, and Major Blackwell is too far away to help, you're going to remember this conversation." She rolled up her map and secured it in her pack. "And you're going to wish you'd listened." Night fell over the Everglades training facility like a suffocating blanket. The temperature dropped maybe 10 degrees, but the humidity stayed at saturation. Somewhere in the darkness, a panther screamed. The sound was almost human. a woman's wail of grief and rage. It raised the hair on the back of your neck and reminded you that humans were not the apex predator here. Elena sat alone outside her temporary quarters, a converted shipping container with a cot and a wall locker. She'd passed on the air-conditioned quarters offered to visiting officers, wanted to acclimate to the heat and humidity, wanted her body to remember what real discomfort felt like before she stepped into something worse. Her satellite phone buzzed. Finally, the message was short, encrypted, from a number with no name attached. Brennan, at facility, meet at fuel depot, 2300. Thorne. She checked her watch, 22:45. She stood stretched and started walking. The fuel depot was on the far side of the facility, a cluster of above-ground tanks surrounded by chain-link fence, far enough from the barracks that an accidental ignition wouldn't kill anyone. The area was dark, no lights, no security cameras, a blind spot in the facility's coverage. A man stepped out of the shadows. Colonel Nathaniel Thorne, 67 years old, weathered as old teak with gunmetal eyes and white hair still cut high and tight. He moved with the careful precision of a body that had survived more damage than it should have. He was wearing civilian clothes, hiking pants, a technical shirt, boots that had seen real miles. No rank, no insignia, nothing to identify him as anything other than an aging outdoorsman. "Sir," Elena said softly. "Whitmore." His voice was gravel wrapped in sandpaper, the result of breathing too much smoke and screaming too many orders over too many years. Situation report. Major Blackwell is compromised. Tremors, dilated pupils, paranoid behavior. My assessment is prescription medication abuse, possibly benzodiazepines or stimulants. He's designed a route that maximizes risk and minimizes safety margins. When I questioned it, he became hostile. Thorne's jaw tightened. The investigation is ongoing. JAG has evidence of financial irregularities, unexplained deposits, possible connections to weapons smuggling operations in the region, but nothing concrete enough for charges yet. He paused. Your role is bait. Elena nodded. She'd suspected as much. Someone in the intelligence chain thinks if we insert near-known smuggling routes, we might draw out contacts. See who Blackwell warns, who changes their patterns. This is bad doctrine, Whitmore, using a training exercise as cover for an investigation. Too many variables, too many ways for people to get hurt. Agreed, sir, but orders are orders. Orders can be changed. I can pull you right now. Call this off. Elena shook her head. If we abort, Blackwell gets spooked. His contacts go to ground. The investigation stalls. She looked out at the darkness. More importantly, those 4 Marines are going into the Everglades tomorrow with a compromised commander and a suicide route. If I'm not there, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Thorne sighed, the sound of a man who'd been having the same argument for 4 decades. You always were too goddamn noble for your own good. Even back in Buds, you were the one who wouldn't quit, wouldn't cut corners, wouldn't leave anyone behind. He paused. Even the ones who'd spent weeks trying to wash you out. You taught me that, sir. I taught you a lot of things, including when to walk away from a bad situation. You also taught me that SEALs don't leave people behind. Those Marines didn't ask for a corrupt CO. They don't deserve to die because someone in JAG wanted to run a cowboy op. Thorne looked at her for a long moment, saw the set of her jaw, the steel in her eyes, the same stubborn determination that had carried her through the hardest military training pipeline in the world. That had made her one of the first women to earn a SEAL Trident. That had taken her on deployments where she'd proven herself again and again in ways that should never have been necessary. But were. All right, he said finally, but I'm not letting you go in there alone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, about the size of a pack of cigarettes, waterproof, shockproof, military grade. GPS tracker, encrypted frequency. I'll know where you are every step of the way. If you need extraction, you hit the panic button. I'm in the air within 30 minutes with a fast rope team. Elena took the tracker. And if Blackwell notices I'm being tracked, he won't. It's shielded to look like background RF noise. Besides, he'll be too busy managing his own situation to worry about yours. Thorne's expression hardened. Whitmore, listen to me. If this goes kinetic, if you encounter actual hostiles, you are authorized to defend yourself and those Marines with lethal force. JAG rules of engagement are in effect. He paused. But your primary mission is to bring those boys home alive. Gathering intelligence on Blackwell is secondary. Am I clear, Crystal, sir? Good. He started to turn away, then stopped. One more thing. He reached into his pocket again, pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, laminated to protect it from water. It showed two much younger men in desert camouflage arms around each other's shoulders, grinning despite the oil fires burning in the background. One of them was a young Nathaniel Thorne. The other was someone Elena recognized instantly. Her father. Kuwait, 1991. Your dad was Air Force Special Tactics. I was leading a SEAL element doing direct action raids. We got ambushed. Iraqi Republican Guard. The real deal, not conscripts. His voice softened. Your father called in danger close airstrikes to pull us out. Saved my entire team. I've owed the Whitmore family for 33 years. Elena's throat was tight. Her father had died when she was 12. Heart attack. Gone before she'd really understood what he did, who he was, the kind of man who made other warriors respect him. He never told me that story. He wouldn't have. That's not the kind of man he was. Thorne carefully returned the photo to his pocket. But he'd be proud of you, Elena. I made him a promise at his funeral. Told him if you ever followed in his footsteps, I'd watch over you. He met her eyes. So here I am, 30 minutes after you pushed that button. I promise. Elena watched him disappear into the darkness. Then she looked down at the tracker in her hand, thought about her father, about a promise made over a grave, about the weight of expectations and the price of legacy. The Panther screamed again in the darkness. Closer this time. The UH-60 Blackhawk beat the pre-dawn air into submission. Inside the cargo bay, 6 souls sat in tense silence. The 4 Marines, Lieutenant Commander Elena Whitmore, and a crew chief who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The helicopter's turbines screamed at a pitch that made conversation impossible, which was a mercy. No one had anything to say. Staff Sergeant Garrett Holloway sat nearest the open door, his M4 carbine held at low ready, his eyes fixed on the darkness rushing past below. The Everglades at 4 in the morning was an absence of light so complete it seemed to swallow the world. No city glow, no street lights, just an endless expanse of black that hid a million ways to die. Corporal Jensen Kincaid sat across from Holloway, his jaw set, his hands checking and rechecking his equipment with mechanical precision. He hadn't looked at Elena once during the flight. The humiliation from yesterday still burned in his gut like bad whiskey. His wrist still ached where she'd hit that pressure point. A dull throb that reminded him every few seconds that he'd been made to kneel before a woman half his size. Private First Class Wyatt Brennan was next to Kincaid, his young face pale in the red cargo lighting. This was his first real field exercise with the platoon. He'd trained for months, proven himself on ranges and obstacle courses. But this was different. This was the Everglades. This was real. Lance Corporal Reed Sullivan sat near the crew chief, his radio equipment already live monitoring frequencies. He'd lost his cocky grin somewhere between yesterday's gear check and now. Replaced it with a professional focus that was probably what he should have led with in the first place. Elena sat in the back corner, her small pack between her boots, her eyes closed. She wasn't sleeping. She was listening to the pitch of the engines, the rhythm of the rotors, the small changes in the airflow that told her they were descending. Her breathing was slow and controlled. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. Combat breathing. The kind that kept your heart rate down and your mind sharp when things got ugly. The crew chief's voice crackled over the internal comm system. 5 minutes to drop zone. Weather check shows tropical storm moving in faster than predicted. You've got maybe 18 hours before it hits. After that, you're looking at 0 visibility and flash flood conditions. Holloway keyed his mic. Copy that. We'll be at the extraction point before the weather turns. The crew chief didn't respond, but Elena saw him exchange a look with the pilot. That look said everything. These jarheads have no idea what they're walking into. The helicopter banked hard. Elena felt the deck tilt beneath her boots. Through the open door, the first gray light of dawn was bleeding into the eastern sky. Enough light to see the landscape below starting to take shape. An endless maze of waterways and vegetation. Cypress trees rising like the masts of drowned ships. Mangroves forming impenetrable walls. Water the color of old pennies hiding depths that could swallow a man whole. 1 minute, the crew chief called it out. The Marines stood, checked their gear one final time. 60-pound packs, weapons, ammunition, enough equipment to sustain them for 72 hours in one of the most hostile environments in North America. Elena stood last. Her pack weighed maybe 30 pounds. The Marines had noticed. They'd exchanged looks that said what their mouths didn't. She's not serious. She's not ready. She's going to slow us down. The helicopter flared nose up, bleeding speed, 30 feet above a small clearing barely large enough for the aircraft. The downdraft from the rotors turned the standing water below into violent chop. Spray filled the air. The noise was apocalyptic. Go, go, go. The Marines fast roped down in textbook fashion. Holloway first establishing security, then Kincaid, then Brennan, then Sullivan. Each one hitting the ground and immediately moving to cover. Weapons up, scanning for threats. Professional, well-trained, confident. Elena went last. She grabbed the rope, wrapped her legs, and descended in a controlled slide that put her on the ground in 4 seconds. Her boots hit solid earth, and she immediately moved away from the landing zone. The Black Hawk pulled up, hard rotors clawing for altitude. The sound of its engines faded rapidly, swallowed by the immensity of the swamp. And then there was silence. Not true silence. The Everglades was never truly quiet, but the mechanical roar of civilization was gone, replaced by something older, more fundamental, the drip of water from broad leaves, the distant bellow of an alligator, the chittering of insects waking to the day, the rustle of things moving through undergrowth that didn't want to be seen. Holloway checked his GPS unit, a ruggedized military model that cost more than most people's cars. Coordinates confirmed. We're 30 clicks from extraction. If we maintain a good pace, we can cover it in 2 days. Hole up on day 3 and be ready for pickup. He started to move out, setting a hard pace through the thick vegetation. The other Marines fell in behind him. Kincaid second, then Brennan, then Sullivan bringing up the rear. Elena didn't follow immediately. She stood still, letting her senses adjust to the environment. Listened to the pattern of bird calls. Watched the way the morning light filtered through the canopy. Noted which direction the breeze was coming from and how the water was flowing. Small things, details that most people would miss. Details that could save your life. A flash of color caught her eye. There, 20 meters to the left of Holloway's planned route. A cluster of bright orange fungi growing on a fallen log. Amanita caesarea, the Caesar's mushroom. It only grew in very specific conditions, rich soil, good drainage, high ground. She looked at Holloway's route, looked at the fungi, made a decision. Sergeant Holloway, her voice carried across the clearing without being loud. A trick of projection learned from years of having to make herself heard over gunfire and explosions. Holloway stopped, turned. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could read the irritation underneath. Ma'am, your route takes you through that low ground ahead. See how the water's got that orange film on top? That's tannins from decaying vegetation. Means it's deep, means it's been standing for weeks. You'll be waist deep in it within 100 meters. GPS shows solid ground, ma'am. GPS shows elevation data from satellites that might be 6 months out of date. The Everglades changes. Flood patterns shift. What was solid ground in January is a swamp in June. Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked at his GPS, looked at the route Elena was suggesting, which angled off to the left toward higher ground marked by those telltale fungi. With respect, Lieutenant Commander, I'm following my navigation plan. We deviate now, we throw off our entire timeline. You follow that route, Sergeant, and you throw off your timeline anyway, because you'll be moving through chest-deep water at quarter speed, not to mention announcing your presence to every predator in a 5-click radius. Kincaid stepped forward. His voice had an edge. Ma'am, the sergeant has the navigation. That's his job. Your job is to observe. That's what the major said. Elena looked at him, saw the challenge in his eyes. This wasn't about navigation. This was about yesterday. This was about ego and pride and a man who'd been embarrassed and wanted to reassert dominance. Corporal, I'm offering tactical advice based on environmental expertise. You're free to ignore it. She paused. But in 6 hours when you're soaked and cold and fighting leeches, remember this conversation. She didn't wait for a response, just adjusted her own pack and started walking in the direction she'd indicated. Not following Holloway's route, not asking permission, just moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. For a moment, the four Marines stood frozen. This was insubordination. This was a breach of protocol. Holloway was the platoon leader. His route was the route. You didn't just walk off and do your own thing. But then Brennan, the youngest, the one with the least invested in ego and hierarchy, looked at the orange-filmed water Holloway's route would take them through, looked at the higher ground Elena was heading toward, made a choice. Sergeant, I think she's right. That water looks deep. Holloway turned on him, ready to snap. But then he actually looked at what Brennan was pointing at. Really looked. Saw the standing water. Saw the film. Saw the way the vegetation changed, becoming more aquatic, more sparse. Signs that any experienced woodsman would recognize as deep water. His jaw worked. Pride versus pragmatism. Leading versus learning. Sullivan broke the silence. Sarge, my old man used to hunt gators out here. He always said, trust the land, not the technology. That water looks bad. Holloway looked at his three Marines, looked at Elena's back already 50 meters away and moving with an efficiency that made their heavy trudging look clumsy. Looked at his GPS, this expensive piece of equipment that was supposed to make navigation foolproof. Fine, he said. The word came out like broken glass. We'll try her route, but if this adds more than an hour to our timeline, we're switching back to the original plan. When they followed Elena into the higher ground, the difference was immediately apparent. The earth under their boots was firm, slightly elevated. The vegetation was different here. Less marsh grass, more hardwood trees. The going was easier, faster, and most importantly, dry. Elena set a pace that was sustainable. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Every half hour she'd stop, ostensibly to check her map, but actually to listen, to read the environment, to teach without making it obvious she was teaching. Birds are quiet ahead, she'd say, pointing northwest. Something moving through there, probably gators heading to water. Or see that tree line, the way the cypress are leaning, storm damage from last hurricane season. Ground there is going to be unstable. Fallen trees create deadfalls, easy to break an ankle. Or smell that, that's methane from decomposing vegetation. Means there's a sinkhole nearby. Watch your footing. Brennan absorbed it all like a sponge. He'd pull out his own map, mark the details she pointed out, ask questions. Ma'am, how do you know about the methane? Is there a specific smell? Like rotten eggs mixed with swamp mud. You smell it, you stop moving. You probe the ground ahead with a stick before you take another step. Sinkholes in the Everglades can be 30 feet deep. You fall in, you're not coming out. Sullivan was listening too, though he tried to hide it. He'd adjust his route based on her observations. Key his radio to mark waypoints she identified as dangerous. Kincaid remained stubbornly silent, but even he was watching her, learning despite himself. Holloway was the hardest sell. Every time Elena stopped to point something out, his hand would drift to his GPS, checking her observations against his electronic data. But increasingly, he was finding that she was right. The sinkholes were where she said they'd be. The game trails led to water sources. The high ground stayed high. By midday, they'd covered 12 clicks. Good time. Better than Holloway's original plan would have achieved, because they hadn't spent 3 hours slogging through chest-deep water. They stopped for a break in a small clearing ringed by cypress trees. The sun was directly overhead now, brutal and unforgiving. The temperature had climbed into the mid-90s, and the humidity was approaching 100%. It felt like breathing through a wet towel. The Marines broke out their ration packs, high-calorie, high-protein meals designed by food scientists to provide optimal nutrition. They tasted like cardboard, but they'd keep you going. Elena pulled out something different, a small cloth bag. From it, she produced what looked like beef jerky, but wasn't. Dried fish, smoked and salted. Ma'am, is that fish? Brennan asked. Mullet, caught it in the Gulf. Smoked it over mangrove wood. 1,500 calories per bag. High protein, no packaging waste. Why not just use the ration packs? Like us, they're designed for this. Elena took a drink from her canteen before answering. Ration packs work fine, but they make you dependent on supply chains, on logistics, on someone else providing for you. She gestured at the swamp around them. Out here, if you know what you're doing, the swamp provides everything you need. Water, food, shelter. If you rely on what you brought, you're always counting down to zero. If you learn to use what's here, you can stay indefinitely. Holloway looked up from his GPS. We're not planning to stay indefinitely, ma'am. 72 hours and then extraction. Plans change, Sergeant. Equipment fails. Extractions get delayed. She met his eyes. The swamp doesn't care about your timeline. It'll kill you just as dead on day 3 as day 1 if you're not prepared. The words hung in the humid air, heavy with truth, heavy with warning. Then Elena's head snapped up. She held up a fist. Stop signal. Every Marine froze. They'd all heard it. A sound that didn't belong. That wasn't the organic noise of the swamp. A mechanical click. Sharp. Distinct. The sound of metal on metal. Elena tilted her head, listening with absolute focus. There. Again. Northwest. Maybe 200 meters out. And this time it was accompanied by voices. Low. Speaking with heavy Eastern European accents. Too far to make out words, but close enough to identify the language. Sullivan's eyes went wide. Opfer doesn't speak with accents like that. Holloway's face had gone pale. Could be civilians. Hikers, maybe. The distinct chatter of an AK-47 on full auto cut through the humid air like a chainsaw. A 5-second burst. Then another. Then a third. Not firing at anything, just test firing, clearing a jam, or checking function. That was not the sound of blank training rounds. That was the real thing, 30 rounds of 7. 60 to 39 mm, screaming through the jungle at 2,300 feet per second, enough to cut a man in half. Brennan's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell is that? Elena's face had changed, gone hard. The neutral observer mask replaced by something else. Something colder. Something that had seen combat and survived it and was preparing to see it again. That's trouble. She pulled out her satellite phone, checked the signal. Nothing. The storm moving in was creating too much atmospheric interference. She looked at Holloway. Sergeant, we need to move. Now, quietly, away from that sound. But the OPE for the exercise, that's not offer. That's weapons smugglers using the Everglades as a transit route. They're armed with live ammunition, and they do not care about rules of engagement. Kincaid's hand had gone to his M4. He started to unsling it. Then we engage. We're armed. We're trained. With training rounds, Corporal. Simunition. Colored wax bullets designed to mark targets, not stop them. You open fire on professional killers with training ammunition, and the only thing you'll accomplish is making them laugh while they kill you. The words hung in the humid air like a death sentence. Sullivan keyed his radio. Base, this is Bravo 6. We have hostile contact. Requesting immediate static. Pure white noise. The atmospheric interference was total. Were communications dark, he said. His voice had gone hollow. Holloway's training kicked in. Leadership in crisis. Make a decision. Any decision is better than paralysis. We evade, move to secondary rally point. Try to get comms working. Request extraction. Negative. Elena's voice had absolute authority now. Not suggesting, not advising, commanding. Your secondary rally point is 4 clicks northwest. Same direction as those gunshots. You move that way, you walk right into them. Then what do you suggest, Lieutenant Commander? Another burst of gunfire. Closer now, maybe 150 meters. They were moving, patrolling, sweeping the area, and then carried on the breeze words with heavy accents. Elena listened. Her expression changed. Went from hard to something worse. Something that looked almost like recognition. Is she here? A male voice asking a question in accented English. Yes, the hunter confirmed it. The phantom has returned. Another voice answering, confirming. The Marines didn't understand the significance, but Elena did, and what she heard made her blood run cold. They weren't just patrolling, they were hunting. hunting for someone specific, and she had a terrible sinking certainty that the someone was her. 2 years ago, border operation in Texas, a weapons smuggling ring supplying arms to terrorist cells. Her SEAL team had responded to intelligence about a major transaction. She'd been the one who took the shot, center mass through the scope of an M110 sniper rifle at 400 meters. The target had been Milos Dragan, a former Serbian Special Forces operator turned arms dealer, the logistics coordinator for a network that had been moving weapons across 3 continents. One shot, one kill, mission success. But in the world of international crime, blood demanded blood. Family demanded vendetta. And Viktor Dragan Milos's younger brother had sworn that the woman who killed his brother would die screaming. The intelligence community had assured her it was just talk, empty threats from a grief-stricken sibling. Viktor was in Eastern Europe. She was in the United States. The ocean was a wall. She was safe. Except now she was in the Everglades, 30 clicks from civilization, with 4 Marines armed with training ammunition. And somewhere in the green hell around her, men with real guns were hunting. Not random, not coincidence. This was a trap, and she'd walked right into it. Holloway was staring at her, waiting for direction he didn't want to take from her, but didn't know how to refuse. "Lieutenant Commander, what do we do?" Elena's mind was racing, calculating, assessing. 4 Marines under her protection, limited armament, no communication, hostile forces of unknown number, storm approaching, extraction hours away, even if they could call for it. The equation didn't balance. Too many variables, too few solutions, but she'd been in worse situations. Somalia, Syria, Yemen, places where the odds were impossible and survival was a matter of will more than firepower. She made a decision. We go dark, no comms, no GPS, no electronics that emit signals. We move into the deep swamp, the water where they won't expect us and can't follow easily. Kincaid looked at the dark water visible through the trees, the kind of water that hid gators and snakes and things that would kill you just as dead as bullets. Into that, are you insane? Into that, because those men are hunters, Corporal, but they're land hunters. They'll stick to dry ground, to the trails. The deep swamp is where we have the advantage. What advantage? We'll be moving through water up to our chests. Our weapons will get foul. We'll be sitting ducks. We'll be invisible. And I know how to move through water without leaving a trail. She met his eyes. Do you trust me or not? The question hung there. Did they trust her? This woman who'd embarrassed their best fighter, who'd questioned their commanding officer, who'd led them off their planned route into unknown territory. Brennan answered first. I trust you, ma'am. Sullivan nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. Holloway looked at Kincaid. The corporal's face was a war between pride and pragmatism, between ego and survival. Finally, slowly, he nodded. Fine, we do it your way. But if this goes wrong, Corporal, we're all dead anyway. She started to move, then froze. Sullivan, the young radio operator, had been moving to follow her when his foot caught on a submerged root. He went down hard. The splash was loud in the quiet swamp. Too loud. The voices stopped. Then rapid conversation in accented English. They'd heard. They were coming to investigate. And then gunfire erupted. Not test firing this time. Aimed fire. Bullets ripped through the vegetation around them, shredding leaves, splintering bark, kicking up geysers of swamp water. Sullivan screamed. Elena saw it happen, saw the round take him in the thigh, saw the blood bright arterial red spurting into the brown water, saw his face go white with shock and pain. Contact front, Holloway shouted. The Marines scattered, taking cover, returning fire with their training rounds. Useless, absolutely useless. The simunition rounds made popping sounds. Left colored marks on trees, did absolutely nothing to stop the 4 men advancing through the swamp with real weapons. Elena moved, not away from the gunfire, towards Sullivan. She grabbed him under the arms, dragged him behind a massive cypress trunk. The bark exploded inches from her head as a round impacted. She didn't flinch, just kept moving. Got Sullivan into cover, looked at his leg. The wound was bad, through and through. Femoral artery nicked but not severed. If it had been severed, he'd already be dead. but he was bleeding. Fast. She ripped open her medical kit, pulled out a tourniquet, an Israeli bandage, hemostatic gauze. "This is going to hurt," she said, and then she went to work. Sullivan screamed again as she cinched the tourniquet above the wound, screamed as she packed the entry wound with gauze, screamed as she wrapped the bandage tight enough to stop a river. But he didn't pass out. Good. She needed him conscious. "Can you move?" she asked. Yeah, I think so." "Can you shoot?" He looked at his M4, looked at the men advancing toward them. "Training rounds won't stop them." "No, but they might slow them down, might make them think twice, and that's all we need." She looked at the other 3 Marines. They were pinned down, returning useless fire, burning through ammunition that couldn't hurt the enemy. But they were professional. They were trained, and they were holding the line while she worked on their wounded. Elena made another decision. "Sergeant Holloway," her voice cut through the gunfire, "I'm going to draw them off. Take Sullivan. Move east. Find solid ground and hole up. I'll find you." "Lieutenant Commander, we don't leave people behind." "You're not leaving me, Sergeant. I'm giving you an order." She met his eyes through the chaos. "Get these men to safety. That's your mission now." "What are you going to do?" Elena's smile was cold, predatory, the smile of someone who'd hunted humans before and knew exactly how good she was at it. "I'm going to remind them why they called me Phantom." She moved before Holloway could argue. Didn't run, didn't splash, just flowed through the water like smoke, angling northwest, toward the voices, toward the danger. The Marines watched her go, wanted to follow. Every instinct screamed to back up their teammate, but Holloway's training overrode instinct. She'd given an order. She was the senior special warfare operator. His job was to follow orders and protect his men. "Move," he hissed. "East, now. Sullivan, lean on Brennan. Kincaid, rear guard. Go." They moved. Behind them, Elena Whitmore disappeared into the swamp like she'd never existed at all. The hostile patrol was 4 men, experienced, well-armed, each carrying an AK-47 variant and enough ammunition to fight a small war. They wore civilian clothes but moved with military precision. Ex-special forces, Serbian probably. Men who'd learned how to hunt and kill from the best, then sold those skills to the highest bidder. They were sweeping through the high ground, looking for the source of the gunfire, looking for the Americans they'd been sent to find. Confident, professional, deadly. They never saw Elena coming. She was in the water, submerged to her nose, breathing through a hollow reed she'd cut from the marsh. A trick older than recorded history. Simple, effective, invisible. The first man walked within 3 feet of her. She could have reached out and touched his boots. Instead, she waited, patient, still, a predator in her element. He passed. She rose from the water like a nightmare made flesh. No sound, no splash. Just there, behind him. One hand covering his mouth, the other finding the carotid artery on his neck. Not a choke, a blood strangle. Cutting off oxygen to the brain without cutting off air to the lungs. Silent, efficient, unconscious in 8 seconds. She lowered him into the water, used paracord to bind him to a submerged root, positioned his head above water so he wouldn't drown. Not mercy, just efficiency. A prisoner could be questioned later. A corpse couldn't. She took his AK-47 from the water, checked the action, cleared the barrel. It was a well-maintained weapon. Good. The second man was 20 meters away, moving through thick vegetation. Elena ghosted through the water, using the sound of his movement to mask her own. Got within 10 meters. 5. 3. He sensed something, started to turn, too slow. Elena surged from the water, slammed the AK's stock into his solar plexus. The blow drove every molecule of air from his lungs. He folded like paper. She caught him before he could fall and make noise, applied the same blood strangle, bound him the same way. 2 down. The third man was smarter, or maybe just luckier. He'd heard something, not enough to identify, just enough to make him cautious. He'd taken cover behind a massive cypress tree, his weapon up, scanning. Elena circled wide, used the water, came at him from an angle he couldn't see. But he was good, trained. He sensed her presence at the last second, started to swing his weapon around. She went low, swept his legs. He went down hard. His finger found the trigger by reflex, and the AK roared. sending a burst of automatic fire into the canopy. Birds exploded from the trees, their wings hammering the air. The sound was a disaster. Every hostile within a mile now knew exactly where they were. Elena didn't have time for subtlety. She stripped the weapon from his hands, reversed it, drove the stock into his temple. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to scramble his brain for the next hour. He went limp. The fourth man was already running toward the sound of gunfire. Elena could hear him crashing through the undergrowth, maybe 30 seconds out. No time to hide, no time to prepare. She made a choice, left the three bound men, took their weapons, all three AK-47s slung across her back. The weight was enormous, but she'd carried worse. Then she ran, not away, toward the sound of the fourth man, toward danger. Because sometimes the best defense was violence of action so sudden and overwhelming that the enemy's decision-making process collapsed. She saw him through the trees. Big guy, probably 6'4", 220, moving fast for someone his size. Weapon up, ready? Elena stepped out from behind a tree, directly in front of him. His eyes went wide. He started to bring his weapon to bear. Too slow, too surprised, too focused on finding an enemy in the distance to process one standing 8 feet away. Elena's first round took him in the right shoulder. Not center mass, not a kill shot, a disabling shot. The 7.62 round shattered his clavicle and spun him like a top. His weapon flew from nerveless fingers. He tried to get up, tried to reach for a sidearm at his belt. Elena's second round went into the ground 6 inches from his head. The message was clear. Stay down or the next one goes between your eyes. He stayed down. She secured him the same way she'd secured the others. Zip-tied, gagged, bound to immovable objects, not corpses, prisoners. 4 men neutralized, 0 friendly casualties, 0 enemy KIA. It was the kind of operation that would never make the news, that would never be acknowledged. But that represented the highest level of special warfare competence. Violence applied with surgical precision, force used in exact proportion to necessity. But the gunfire had announced her position to everyone within a mile. There were more men out there, at least 3 at a rally point somewhere nearby, and Victor Dragan himself, the hunter who'd sworn to kill her. The storm was building too. She could feel it in the pressure change, see it in the darkening sky. Maybe 2 hours before it hit. After that, visibility would be 0. Movement would be nearly impossible. She needed to find the Marines, needed to get them to safety, needed to call for extraction. But first she needed information. She went back to the fourth man, the one she'd shot in the shoulder. He was conscious, pale with pain and blood loss, but conscious. She knelt beside him. How many? She asked. He spat at her. She pressed her thumb into his wounded shoulder. He screamed. How many? 7 total. 4 here, 3 at the rally point. Where's Dragan? The man's eyes flickered. Fear. Real fear. The old sugar mill, 3 clicks north. He's waiting for you, Phantom. He knew you'd come. How did he know I'd be here? The man laughed. A wet, painful sound. Your major, Blackwell. He's been paid for months, fed us your training schedule. Your route, everything. Led you here like a lamb to slaughter. The confirmation of what she'd suspected hit like a physical blow. Blackwell hadn't just been incompetent. He'd been actively working against them. This whole exercise had been designed to deliver her to Dragan. The other Marines, where are they? Searching, looking for them. Dragan wants them alive. One is you to watch them die before he kills you. Lena's grip tightened. This man had just told her he planned to hunt and kill 4 young Americans who'd done nothing except follow orders. The rage that filled her was cold, controlled, lethal. Change of plans. She applied pressure to his carotid artery. Not the wound, just her hand. The blood choke was instant. He went limp in 8 seconds. She bound him like the others, took his radio, his ammunition, his sidearm. Then she pulled out her satellite phone. The signal was weak, but present. Enough, she typed rapidly. Thorne, Blackwell compromised. Confirmed hostile contact. 4 neutralized. 3 plus HVT still active. Marines separated, 1 wounded. Storm inbound. Request immediate QRF. She hit send, watched the message compress and encrypt. Watched it launch into the satellite network. Watched it bounce through encrypted channels to reach Colonel Nathaniel Thorne. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. 2 words. Inbound. Thorne. But they meant everything. Help was coming. An old warrior was strapping on his armor one more time. A promise made over a grave was being kept. Elena allowed herself one moment of relief, just one. Then she shoved the phone back in her pocket, checked the captured AK-47s, and started moving east, toward the Marines, toward 4 young men who were probably terrified and definitely alone, and absolutely counting on her to get them home alive. The storm hit like the fist of an angry god. One moment the sky was bruised purple. The next it opened up and emptied itself onto the Everglades with biblical fury. Rain came down in sheets so thick it was like standing under a waterfall. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. The temperature plummeted 15 degrees in as many minutes. What had been oppressive heat became a cold that seeped into bones and refused to leave. Elena found the Marines huddled under the spreading branches of a massive cypress tree. It provided almost no shelter. They were soaked to the skin within seconds. Their expensive Gore-Tex gear designed to keep them dry in any conditions was utterly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of water falling from the sky. Holloway's GPS was dead. The screen had fogged over from the inside, moisture having penetrated the supposedly waterproof seal. His backup GPS was showing error messages. The satellite signal couldn't punch through the storm. They were navigationally blind. Sullivan's radio was still functional but useless. Every frequency was pure static. The atmospheric interference from the storm was creating an electromagnetic wall that no signal could penetrate. They were communications dark. Sullivan himself was pale, his wounded leg bandaged tight, but the blood loss was taking its toll. He was shivering, going into shock. Kincaid saw Elena first. His weapon came up by instinct, then lowered when he recognized her. "Lieutenant Commander, we thought—" "I know what you thought. You were wrong." She unslung one of the AK-47s, handed it to Holloway. 7.62 by 39mm 30-round magazine, full auto-capable. "You know how to run an AK." Holloway took the weapon. It was real, heavy, lethal, not training equipment, actual military hardware. "Yes, ma'am, but where did you—" "The 4 men who were hunting us don't need them anymore." She handed the second rifle to Kincaid. The third to Brennan. "I left them tied up about 2 clicks west. When this storm clears, someone will find them. Until then, we have bigger problems." "Ma'am, what problems?" Elena pulled out the radio she'd taken from the hostels. 3 more at a rally point 4 clicks north. High-value target confirmed at an old sugar mill 7 clicks northeast. She met their eyes. Target is Viktor Dragan, former Serbian Special Forces, now runs weapons across 3 continents. His brother was Milos Dragan. "I killed him 2 years ago in a border operation in Texas." The words landed like bombs. This whole thing, the exercise, the route, it was all a setup. Blackwell has been feeding them intelligence for months. He knew we'd be here, knew I'd be here. This was designed to deliver me to Dragan. Kincaid's face went through several shades of red. "That son of a bitch, yeah, I'll kill him. I swear to God, I'll—" "You'll do nothing, Corporal, because Blackwell is already being investigated. Federal agents will pick him up as soon as we report in. His career is over. His freedom is over." She looked at each of them. "Our job now is to survive and get home." Holloway's tactical mind was already working the problem. 7 clicks to the sugar mill, another 15 to extraction. In this storm with Sullivan wounded, that's maybe 18 hours of movement. We don't have that kind of time. "No, we don't." Elena knelt down, spread her map on the wet ground. The Marines gathered around. "The rally point has 3 hostiles, armed, professional. They're expecting us to run, expecting to drive us toward Dragan like deer toward hunters." She traced a route on the map. "We're not going to run." Sullivan looked up from where he was lying. His voice was weak but determined. "Ma'am, what are we going to do?" Elena's smile was predatory. "We're going to attack." The rain hammered down like artillery fire. Elena knelt in the mud, her map spread before her, the ink running in the deluge but still legible enough to matter. 4 Marines gathered around her, one wounded, all exhausted, all terrified, all trusting her with their lives. "The rally point is here," she said, tapping a spot on the map. "Elevated ground, good sight lines. 3 hostiles probably dug in waiting for us to stumble into their kill zone." Holloway studied the terrain. "That's a defensive position, ma'am. Attacking uphill in this weather with wounded personnel and improvised weapons. That's not tactics. That's suicide. It would be if we attack from the direction they're expecting." Elena traced a line around the position. "They're watching south and west, the directions we'd logically retreat. But here to the northeast, there's a drainage creek, seasonal, usually dry. But in this storm, it'll be running fast and deep. You want us to approach through a flooded creek. I want you to provide a distraction from the south while I approach through the creek. They'll focus on your fire. They won't expect anyone coming from behind." Kincaid shook his head. "Ma'am, with respect, that's insane. You'll be moving through rushing water in zero visibility. One slip and you're dead." "I've done it before, Corporal. Yemen, similar conditions, worse odds." She looked at each of them in turn. "Here's the plan. Brennan, you're our best shot. You set up 300 meters south with Sullivan's rifle. The AK has better range than the M4 simunition. When I give the signal, you start putting rounds near their position. Not trying to hit them, just making them think the main attack is coming from your direction." Brennan nodded. His young face was pale but determined. "Holloway and Kincaid, you move to the west. Make noise, draw attention. Fire and maneuver, classic infantry tactics. Make them think a full squad is assaulting their position." And Sullivan, Elena looked at the wounded radio operator. He was shivering, blood loss and shock taking their toll. But his eyes were clear, his jaw was set. "Sullivan stays with Brennan, provides security, and if things go wrong, he calls for extraction the moment the storm breaks enough for radio contact." Sullivan tried to stand. "Ma'am, I can still fight. You can still get yourself killed and take one of us with you trying to save you." Her voice was hard, but not cruel. "Private, you've already proven yourself today. You took a bullet and kept moving. You didn't panic. You didn't quit. That's more than most men can say." She met his eyes. "But right now, the best thing you can do for this team is stay alive, stay hidden, and be ready to call for help when the time comes. Can you do that?" Sullivan held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I can do that." "Good." Elena checked her weapon. The captured AK was clean despite the rain. "Well maintained. Ready. We move in 15 minutes. Brennan, find your position. Holloway, Kincaid, work your way west. I'll approach from the creek." She paused. "When you hear my shots, that's the signal. The attack begins. Until then, total silence. Total discipline. We are ghosts." Kincaid stepped forward. Something had changed in his face. The arrogance was gone. The resentment was gone. What remained was something harder, something better. Respect. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. For yesterday, for what I said, for what I thought. I was wrong." Elena looked at him. "Save it for when we're home, Corporal. You can buy me a beer and tell me how wrong you were in detail." A ghost of a smile crossed Kincaid's face. "Yes, ma'am. I'll do that. Now move out. We have work to do." They moved, 4 shadows dissolving into the storm. Elena watched them go, then turned toward the creek, toward the rushing water, toward the enemy. The creek was exactly as bad as she'd expected. Waist-deep water moving fast enough to knock a grown man off his feet. Debris floating past, branches and leaves and things she didn't want to identify. The rain was so heavy she could barely see 5 feet ahead. But she'd trained for this, trained in conditions worse than this. And she had something the enemy didn't have. She had purpose. She had 4 young men counting on her. She had a promise to keep. Elena entered the water. The cold hit her like a physical blow, drove the breath from her lungs, made her muscles seize. She forced herself to breathe. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. Combat breathing. The cold receded. It became manageable, became just another factor to account for. She moved upstream, using rocks and roots for handholds, reading the current, finding the channels where the water was slowest. Every step was a battle. Every meter gained was a victory. Behind her, the world had disappeared, swallowed by rain and darkness. Ahead, the rally point waited. 3 men with automatic weapons. 3 men who thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn how wrong they were. It took 45 minutes to cover 300 meters. 45 minutes of fighting the current, of staying silent despite the cold, of moving through water that wanted to sweep her away. But she made it, emerged from the creek behind the rally point. Above her on the elevated ground, she could see the dim shapes of the 3 hostiles. They'd set up a rough camp under a tarp stretched between trees. Smart. Staying dry while they waited. They were watching south and west, just as she'd predicted. They never looked behind them. Elena found cover, settled her breathing, checked her weapon one final time. Then she keyed the radio she'd taken from the hostiles. 3 clicks, the signal 300 meters to the south. Brennan heard the clicks. He settled his cheek against the stock of the AK-47, found the rally point in his sights, took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the storm. The round hit a tree trunk 3 feet from one of the hostiles, close enough to make them dive for cover, close enough to make them think the attack was coming from that direction. All 3 men grabbed their weapons, started returning fire toward the south. To the west, Holloway and Kincaid opened up, moving and shooting, classic fire and maneuver, making enough noise for a squad. The hostiles shifted their attention, split their fire between 2 directions. They never saw Elena rise from the creek behind them. Never saw her move through the rain like a ghost. Never saw her close the distance. The first one died without knowing he was dead. Not dead, unconscious. Elena's blow to the base of his skull was precise, calculated. Enough force to drop him instantly. Not enough to kill. She'd made a decision back in the swamp. No more killing unless absolutely necessary. These men were criminals, murderers. They'd come to kill her and 4 innocent Marines. But they were also human beings, and she'd had enough of death. The second hostile turned at the sound of his companion falling. Too slow. Elena's knee drove into his solar plexus. Her elbow cracked against his temple. He went down like a puppet with its strings cut. The third one was faster. He spun, brought his weapon up, actually got a shot off. The round went wild, nowhere near Elena, but it was enough to tell her he was dangerous. She couldn't afford to hold back. She closed the distance before he could fire again, trapped his weapon against his body, drove her forehead into his nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood sprayed. He staggered back, tried to bring the rifle around. Elena swept his legs, took him to the ground, applied a blood choke before he could recover. 8 seconds. He went limp. 3 hostiles neutralized. 0 casualties. She keyed the radio. Rally point secure. Move up. 3 minutes later, the Marines emerged from the storm. Holloway and Kincaid came from the west. Brennan from the south supporting Sullivan, who'd insisted on moving despite his wound. They found Elena standing over the 3 unconscious men, securing them with zip ties, collecting their weapons and ammunition. Jesus, Kincaid breathed. You took all 3 of them. They were overconfident, weren't watching their 6. It happens. She finished securing the last hostile and stood. We need to move. The sugar mill is 4 clicks northeast. Dragan is there with at least 2 more men. Probably more. Holloway checked his GPS. Still dead. How do we navigate in this? We don't need GPS. Elena pulled out her compass, her map. Magnetic declination is 5 degrees west. We correct for that, follow the terrain features, we'll find it. And when we get there, Elena looked at him. Then we finish this. The sugar mill loomed out of the darkness like a nightmare made real, built in the 1920s, abandoned in the 1950s. Reclaimed by the swamp in the decades since. It was a massive structure, 3 stories of crumbling brick and rusted machinery. A smokestack that rose into the storm like an accusing finger. 1 road led in, 1 road led out. Every other approach was deep swamp, exactly as Elena had described. A fortress, a trap, a killing ground. They stopped 500 meters out, hidden in the vegetation, studying the structure through the rain. I count 2 sentries, Holloway said, Main entrance, armed, alert. There'll be more inside. And Dragan himself. Elena studied the building, looking for weakness, looking for opportunity. There on the northeast corner. See that drainage culvert? Holloway squinted through the rain. I see it, but it's underwater and probably collapsed after 70 years. Probably, but not certainly. She turned to the team. Here's the plan. Sullivan stays here with Brennan, 300 meters out, overwatch position. If anyone tries to leave the building, you stop them. Sullivan nodded. His leg was still bleeding through the bandage. His face was gray with pain and exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. Holloway, Kincaid, you're with me. We go through the culvert. If it's passable, we come up inside the building. If not, then we improvise. Kincaid actually laughed, a short, sharp sound. Ma'am, I'm starting to think you're actually insane. Probably, but insane has kept me alive for 25 years. You want safe and predictable, you picked the wrong profession. She checked her weapon one final time. Move out. Radio silence until we're inside. Brennan, if you hear sustained gunfire, that's your cue to start putting rounds through windows. Keep their heads down. Give us room to work. Yes, ma'am. Sullivan, you're our lifeline. The moment this storm breaks enough for radio contact, you call Thorne. Tell him we need extraction now. Can you do that? Sullivan gripped his radio. I can do that, ma'am. You can count on me. I know I can. She looked at each of them. 4 young men who'd started this exercise as cocky, arrogant, dismissive. 4 young men who'd become something more. Warriors, brothers, the kind of men you'd trust with your life. The kind of men who'd trust you with theirs. Let's finish this. The culvert was exactly as bad as she'd expected. 70 years of neglect had filled it with debris, collapsed sections, water that rushed through the narrow spaces with terrifying force. Elena went first, into the darkness, into the water, into the unknown. Holloway followed, then Kincaid, 3 shadows swallowed by the earth. The tunnel was 4 feet in diameter. Maybe. Hard to tell in the absolute darkness. Elena moved by feel, by instinct, by the sixth sense that 25 years of combat had honed to a razor's edge. Her hands found obstacles, moved them aside, found paths through the debris. Behind her, Holloway and Kincaid struggled to keep up. They were good, professional. But this wasn't their world. This was hers. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. 10 meters, 20, 30, and then it stopped. Elena's hands found brick, a wall, a dead end. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. All this way, all this risk, and for nothing. Then her fingers found something else. A gap, small, maybe 18 inches across, but a gap. She squeezed through. Her shoulders scraped brick. Her equipment caught on jagged edges. She had to exhale completely, make herself as small as possible to fit through, but she made it. And on the other side, the tunnel opened up into a basement, dark, musty, filled with rusted equipment and the smell of decay. But inside the sugar mill, she reached back through the gap, helped Holloway through. Then Kincaid. They stood in the darkness, breathing hard, covered in filth and swamp water, but alive and inside. Found stairs, old, wooden, treacherous. Elena tested each step before committing her weight. The first floor was empty. Abandoned machinery, rusted conveyor belts, shadows that could hide anything. But no hostels. They were all above. On the second floor, where the light was, where the voices were. Elena paused at the base of the stairs to the second floor. Listened. 2 voices, maybe 3. One of them giving orders. Dragan. She recognized the accent. Serbian, cultured, cold. The voice of a man who'd ordered death without remorse. The voice of a man who'd sworn to kill her. She looked at Holloway and Kincaid, held up 3 fingers, 3 hostile dials, then pointed up. They nodded. Ready. Elena moved. Up the stairs, silent as death, into the light. The second floor had been converted into a command post, maps on the walls, radio equipment on tables, lanterns providing flickering illumination. And 3 men. 2 of them were the bodyguards she'd expected, large, professional, body armor under their civilian clothes. Weapons held with easy competence. The third man was smaller, thin, dark hair going gray at the temples, eyes that had seen too much death and enjoyed it. Victor Dragan. He was standing by a window, looking out at the storm, waiting. He turned when Elena emerged from the stairwell. His face showed no surprise, no fear, just a cold, calculating interest. "Phantom," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "I knew you would come. I told my men. I said the Phantom will not run. She will not hide. She will come for me. And here you are." Elena kept her weapon up, trained on the bodyguards. "Victor Dragan, you're under arrest for weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and bribery of a United States military officer." Dragan laughed, a soft, cultured sound. "Arrest you Americans and your rules, your laws, your procedures." He shook his head. "I did not come here to be arrested, Phantom. I came here to kill you, to avenge my brother. Your brother was a weapons dealer who supplied arms to terrorist organizations. His weapons killed American soldiers, killed innocent civilians. He made his choices. And you made yours when you put a bullet through his heart." Dragan's voice hardened. "Milos was not always what he became. He was a teacher once. Did you know that mathematics, in Belgrade? He was good at it. The children loved him." He stepped away from the window. "But then the war came, and then the sanctions, and then there was no money for teachers, no money for anything except survival." His eyes burned with something that might have been grief or rage or both. "I brought him into the business, my business. I told him it would be temporary, just until things got better." His voice cracked. "But then our family was threatened. The cartel we worked with, they said if Milos tried to leave, they would kill his wife, his children. He had no choice. None of us did." He looked at Elena with something that might have been pleading. "Do you understand, Phantom? He was not a monster. He was a man trying to protect his family. And your bullet ended him." Elena kept her weapon steady. "He was still a criminal. He was still responsible for deaths." "Yes, he was. And so am I. And so are you, Phantom. We are all killers here. The only difference is who pays us and what we call ourselves." Holloway and Kincaid had emerged from the stairwell, 3 weapons now pointed at the bodyguards. The math had changed. Dragan noticed. "You're Marines. They followed you through the swamp, through the storm, into this place. They trust you. They trust me to get them home. And will you get them home?" "Yes." The word was simple, final, absolute. Dragan studied her for a long moment. "My brother trusted me too. Trusted me to protect him, to keep him safe. And I failed him. I sent him to Texas to that operation, and you killed him." His voice dropped. "I have thought about this moment for 2 years, Phantom. Dreamed about it. Planned for it. I imagined killing you slowly, making you suffer as I have suffered." He reached into his jacket. The bodyguards tensed. So did Elena. But what Dragan pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a photograph. He held it up. A younger Milos Dragan, smiling, standing with a woman and 2 children in front of a modest house. His wife, his children. They still ask me when Papa is coming home, and I cannot tell them. I cannot find the words. Elena's throat tightened. She'd seen photographs like this before, had them seared into her memory. The faces of the people left behind by her bullets. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "I'm sorry for your brother. I'm sorry for his family. I'm sorry for his children. But he made choices. He put himself between me and my mission. And I made mine." She paused. "I wouldn't change it. I couldn't change it. Because if I hadn't taken that shot, more people would have died. More children would be asking when their parents are coming home." Dragan's eyes never left hers. "You truly believe that?" "I do. And it brings you peace." "No, it doesn't. I carry every person I've killed with me. Every day, every night. I see their faces. I remember their names. There is no peace in what I do." She lowered her weapon, just slightly. "But there is purpose. There is meaning. There is the knowledge that my choices, as terrible as they are, serve something larger than myself." The room was silent. Even the storm seemed to quiet. Dragan looked at the photograph in his hands, at his brother's smiling face, at the family that would never be whole again. I came here to kill you, Phantom. I planned for 2 years. I bribed your officer. I positioned my men. I created the perfect trap. He looked up. And now that you are here standing before me, I find that I am tired. He set the photograph on the table. Tired of hatred, tired of revenge, tired of being the monster that my brother's death made me. He looked at his bodyguards. Stand down. They hesitated. I said stand down. Slowly, reluctantly, they lowered their weapons. Elena kept hers up. You are surrendering. I am acknowledging reality. You have won, Phantom. You came through the swamp, through the storm, through my men, and you are standing here with weapons pointed at us. If we fight, we die. And I find that I do not want to die. He smiled, a tired, bitter expression. Not for revenge, not for hatred, not for a brother who made his own choices and paid for them. He held out his hands, wrists together, offering them for binding. Wake me in, Phantom. Let your courts judge me. Let your laws determine my fate. I am done fighting. Elena stared at him. This wasn't what she'd expected, wasn't what she'd prepared for. She'd prepared for violence, for a desperate last stand, for a fight to the death. Not this, not surrender, not acknowledgement. Holloway, she said, secure them. The sergeant moved forward, zip-tied Dragan's wrists, then the bodyguards. Professional, efficient, by the book. Elena lowered her weapon. The tension in the room shifted, from lethal to something else, something almost like relief. Dragan looked at her as Holloway secured his hands. You could have killed me, Phantom. When you came up those stairs, you could have shot all three of us before we knew you were there. That is what I would have done. That's the difference between us. Perhaps, or perhaps you are simply better at lying to yourself. He smiled again, that same tired, bitter expression. We are what we are, Phantom. Killers. The only difference is the stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Elena met his eyes. Maybe, but I choose my stories carefully. And tonight my story is that I brought 4 young men home alive, that I stopped a threat without becoming one myself, that I chose justice over revenge. She paused. What story will you tell yourself, Dragan? Your cell in the dark. What story will let you sleep? He didn't answer, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been doubt, or recognition, or the first crack in a wall built from 2 years of hatred. The storm broke an hour before dawn. Sullivan got the radio working, called for extraction, gave coordinates. 20 minutes later, the sound of helicopter rotors cut through the clearing sky. Not one helicopter. 3. The lead bird touched down in the clearing outside the sugar mill. The side door slid open. Colonel Nathaniel Thorne jumped out before the skids fully settled. 67 years old, moving like a man half his age. He crossed the clearing in quick strides, found Elena standing in the doorway of the mill. Whitmore. Sir. Status. 7 hostiles neutralized, all alive. HVT in custody, 1 friendly wounded but stable. 0 KIA. Thorne absorbed this. His weathered face showed nothing. But his eyes showed everything. Pride. Relief. Something that looked almost like tears. Outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander. Outstanding. Thank you, sir. But it wasn't just me. These Marines, she gestured to Holloway, Kincaid, Brennan, and Sullivan, who were emerging from the building. They followed me into hell. They trusted me when they had every reason not to. They fought when most men would have run. Thorne looked at them. 4 young men, exhausted, wounded, covered in mud and blood and swamp water. But standing, all of them standing. Sergeant Holloway. Holloway came to attention, snapped a salute. Sir, I understand you followed Lieutenant Commander Whitmore's lead throughout this operation, even when it contradicted your original orders. Holloway hesitated. Yes, sir. The situation on the ground changed. The Lieutenant Commander had superior tactical knowledge and experience. Following her lead was the right call. It was, and it saved your lives. Thorne returned the salute. Well done, Sergeant. All of you. Well done. He turned back to Elena. There's something you should know. Major Blackwell was taken into custody 6 hours ago, FBI. Charges include conspiracy, bribery, and treason. He's not going to see the outside of a prison cell for the rest of his life. Lena nodded. She should have felt satisfaction, vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. Sir, if you don't mind, I'd like to accompany my Marines to the medical facility. Make sure they're taken care of. Your Marines, Thorne smiled. I thought they were Force Recon, Marine Corps. They are, sir, but for the last 24 hours, they were mine. And I'd like to see them safe before I stand down. Thorne studied her, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of responsibility she still carried, the refusal to let go until the job was truly done. Permission granted, Lieutenant Commander. But after that, you're getting medical attention yourself. That's an order. Yes, sir. She started toward the helicopter, then stopped, turned back. Sir, you kept your promise, 30 minutes after I pushed the button. Just like you said. Thorne's expression softened. I made a promise to your father, Whitmore, a long time ago, to watch over you, to keep you safe. He paused. I think he'd say I did my job tonight, and I think he'd say you did yours. Alina's throat tightened. Thank you, sir, for everything. She walked to the helicopter, climbed aboard, found a seat among her Marines. Sullivan was on a stretcher, Brennan beside him holding an IV bag. Holloway and Kincaid sat across from them. All four of them looked up as she sat down. Holloway spoke first. Ma'am, on behalf of the team, I want to say thank you. You saved our lives, multiple times. We wouldn't have made it without you. Kincaid nodded. What he said, and I want to apologize again. For how I treated you, for what I thought. I was an arrogant ass. You were corporal, but you learned. That's what matters. Brennan leaned forward. Ma'am, I'm going to apply for Bud's SEAL training. After this, I know I want to be the kind of operator you are. Elena smiled. It's a hard road, Private. Harder than anything you've experienced. Harder than this. I know, ma'am, but if you can do it, I can try. Sullivan, despite his pain, managed a weak grin. I'd applied too, ma'am, but I think they might have concerns about my running ability for a while. You ran when it mattered, Private. You moved on that leg when most men would have stayed down. That's what counts. The helicopter lifted off, banked toward the east, towards civilization, towards safety. Elena looked out the window, at the Everglades falling away below, at the green hell that had tried to kill them, at the swamp that had been her proving ground once again. She thought about Dragan, about his brother, about the choices that led them all to this moment, about the thin line between justice and revenge, about the stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night. She thought about her father, about the promise Thorne had made, about the legacy she carried, about what it meant to be worthy of that legacy. She thought about the four young men sitting with her, about the fear they'd overcome, about the trust they'd given her, about who they would become because of this night. Holloway would go back to his unit a better leader. Kincaid would lose his chip and find his purpose. Brennan would chase his dream and maybe, just maybe, earn his own trident. Sullivan would heal and remember and carry this story with him forever. And she would go on to the next mission, the next challenge, the next group of people who needed her skills. Because that's what she was, a protector, a guardian, a phantom who walked through darkness so others wouldn't have to. She looked at each of them, saw their futures written in the set of their jaws, the clarity in their eyes. Holloway would return to his unit a different man, a leader who knew that real strength wasn't about ego. It was about protecting the people who trusted you. Kincaid would finally let go of the chip on his shoulder, would find his purpose not in proving others wrong, but in becoming the best version of himself. Brennan would chase his dream, would stand on the grinder at Coronado and remember this night when the instructors tried to break him, and he would not break. Sullivan would heal, would carry a scar and a story, would tell his grandchildren about the woman who dragged him behind a tree and saved his life while bullets flew. And Elena would go on. The helicopter flew east, into the dawn, into a future none of them could predict. But whatever came next, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had brought them home. All of them. Alive. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the kills, not the glory, not the medals or the recognition. Just the simple, profound truth that the people she was responsible for had survived. That was her story. That was her purpose. That was enough. The sun broke over the horizon. Golden light flooded the helicopter, chased away the darkness, promised a new day. Elena closed her eyes, and for the first time in 24 hours, she let herself